In October of 1972, veterans of hundreds of deep dives, Bret Gilliam, Robbie Mcllvaine, and Rod Temple were on a scientific expedition to recover samples for a research project at Cane Bay. They planned to inspect the deepest parts of the sea at 210 feet. Rod was the dive leader and timekeeper, in charge of the paperwork and running the decompression schedule during the ascent. As Bret and Robbie worked, Rod looked around. He spotted two white-tipped sharks, one about 12 feet and the other a bit bigger, swimming in the distance. This was nothing new to them as they dove with sharks routinely, but it was rare to see these open ocean species so close to shore. After completing their inspection, Rod was unable to ascend. Bret and Robbie noticed something was amiss, and they paused at a coral ledge at 175 feet to decompress and adhere to safe diving procedures for their ascent to the surface. Decompression, sometimes referred to as the bends, is the process of gradually lowering body pressure after a dive or before ascent. Gas bubbles can form in a diver's bloodstream and tissues due to a sudden change in pressure, which can have major health consequences. As depth increases, so does water pressure, which compresses the air in a diver's body. The deeper the dive, the faster the diver depletes his air. Oceanic pressure not only harms divers, it's also one of the greatest fears for vessels. To avoid harm, divers must maintain equal pressure in their ears, masks, and lungs. Rapid pressure fluctuations can cause decompression sickness, and the best way to avoid it is to carefully ascend. This is a common precautionary measure to avoid decompression sickness. One of the most frightening pressure-induced diving disasters is the 2023 OceanGate Titan implosion. While Bret and Robbie hung suspended in their decompression stop, Rod was supposed to be the last to ascend, but they sensed something was wrong when they saw a big bubble of air rise through the water from below them. They thought that Rod had some sort of air failure. Since Bret's air consumption was lower, he decided to send Robbie up, and then he went to see if Rod needed help. But when Bret reached Rod, things were about as bad as they could get. The 12-foot white-tipped shark had bitten into Rod's left thigh and was tearing violently at his flesh. Clouds of blood mixed in with the bubbles. The second shark appeared and made a blinding strike, ripping into Rod's calf. Bret grabbed Rod by his shoulder harness and tried to pull him free. Both divers beat at the sharks with their fists, and the sharks finally let go, but only momentarily. The predators quickly returned, bypassing Bret and striking Rod's bleeding legs again and again. Rod had lost lots of blood, and Bret felt Rod's body go limp in his arms. The sharks dragged Rod deeper, pulling him from Bret's grasp, leaving Bret 400 feet beneath the surface, in shock and practically out of air. Bret's depth gauge was pegged at 325 feet, but he knew he was far deeper than that. Feeling utterly helpless and exhausted, Bret summoned his last reserves of strength, launching himself into a powerful kick for the surface. He focused solely on maintaining his kick cycle, willing himself upward. After what seemed like an eternity, Bret sneaked a look at his depth gauge, and it was still pegged at 325 feet. Bret sucked hard on the regulator and got a bit of breath. Not much, but it fueled his oxygen-starved brain a bit longer, and he prayed his legs would get him up shallow enough to get another breath before hypoxia, an abnormal condition caused by a decrease in oxygen to body tissue, shut down his systems forever. Bret struggled till he managed to make it to the surface with the help of his safety vest. But Bret still had to deal with an unknown amount of omitted decompression and the certainty that he was severely bent. By the time he reached the beach, Bret could barely stand. A couple on their honeymoon waded out and dragged him up on the sand. Bret gasped out instructions to get the oxygen unit from his van and collapsed. In an incredible burst of good fortune, it turns out the wife was an ER nurse from Florida and understood the pathology of decompression sickness. Bret drifted away again into unconsciousness and was revived at the airport where a medevac flight was waiting to fly into Puerto Rico. But the Navy chamber at the base on the island's west end was down, and it was decided to take him to the only other functional facility up on the island's northwest corner, nearly 200 miles farther away. But the flight crew was afraid Bret wouldn't make it when they ran low on oxygen shortly after passing San Juan. So they had the police stop traffic on the main divided highway and landed on the road where a waiting Coast Guard helicopter snatched him away to the hospital roof. 2 days later, Bret was released, but with residual numbness in his arms and legs, substantial hearing loss, and legal blindness in his right eye that persisted until corrected by modern laser surgery in 1997. Robbie's last view of Rod and Bret was as they were dragged over a wall in a cloud of blood by the sharks. He never saw Bret's free ascent, and so reported both of them killed when he got to shore. Based on recorded attacks, the most dangerous shark species to humans are ranked as 1. Great white shark. This species has the highest number of unprovoked attacks on humans, largely due to its powerful bite and presence in popular coastal areas. 2. Tiger shark. Known for its wide-ranging diet and frequenting of shallow coastal waters, the tiger shark ranks second in the number of recorded attacks. 3. Bull shark. This shark's aggressive behavior, combined with its ability to thrive in both saltwater and freshwater, places it third in terms of recorded attacks on humans. These sharks are more likely to attack humans due to their natural hunting instincts and habitats that overlap with human activities, such as swimming and surfing. However, shark attacks on humans are relatively rare, and these species do not typically seek out humans as prey. However, oceanic white-tip sharks are one of the most deadly sharks known to humans. Now, contrary to popular opinion, they do attack people, especially when they feel threatened. They have been observed to attack survivors of ship and plane crashes at sea and are suspected of being responsible for some unreported human fatalities. These deep-sea monsters are notorious for their aggressive behavior, particularly when feeding or approaching prey. The USS Indianapolis had delivered the crucial components of the first operational atomic bomb to a naval base on the Pacific island of Tinian. On August 6, 1945, the weapon would level Hiroshima, but now, on July 28th, the Indianapolis sailed from Guam without an escort to meet the battleship USS Idaho in the Leyte Gulf in the Philippines and prepare for an invasion of Japan. Tragically, the USS Indianapolis sank on July 30, 1945, after being torpedoed by a Japanese submarine on the way to the Philippines. Of the nearly 1,200 men on board, around 900 survived the sinking, but the ship's sinking was just the beginning of the sailors' nightmare. The survivors looked for the dead floating in the water and used their life jackets to help those who didn't have one. Survivors began to form groups in the open ocean, some small, others larger than 300. They were floating helplessly on sea for 4 days. They faced exposure, thirst, and shark attacks from white-tip sharks. The sharks were drawn to the explosions, the sinking of the ship, and the blood in the water. The oceanic white-tip sharks concentrated on the floating dead the first night. The sharks then focused their attention on the living, particularly the injured and bleeding. Sailors attempted to isolate themselves from anyone with an open wound, and when someone died, they pushed the body away, expecting to sacrifice the corpse in exchange for a reprieve from the shark's mouth. On the 4th day in the water, a Navy jet flying overhead saw the survivors and radioed for assistance. Within hours, another seaplane piloted by Lieutenant Adrian Marks arrived at the site, dropping rafts and survival kits. When Marks observed men being attacked by sharks, he disregarded instructions and didn't hesitate to jump into the sea to save the survivors. One of the most frightening things about these creatures is that they're quite difficult to detect. Their grayish-white coloration and slender build make them hard to identify in the water. What's worse, they are most active at night, which makes them a possible hazard to people in low-light situations. They're also known for their elusive behavior, which has made it hard for scientists and researchers to study and understand them. Sharks are naturally curious animals and may investigate unfamiliar objects or beings in their environment with a test bite. This is often exploratory rather than aggressive behavior. Sharks may confuse humans with their natural prey. For example, surfers paddling on surfboards can resemble seals or sea lions from below, leading sharks to mistakenly bite. It's important to note that sharks do not see humans as typical prey, and most bites are not followed by further aggressive behavior. The majority of shark species are not dangerous to humans and play a crucial role in the marine ecosystems.